Welcome to the Road to Redemption podcast with your host, Cam Williamson. Each week, Cam sets out to shatter the labels and stigmas associated with mental health awareness by giving life lessons and raw overviews of events happening around the world.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back to this episode of the Road to Redemption podcast. Didn't like calling it the Gangster of Love podcast. We're staying with the Road to Redemption. Sorry for all the changes, but we're back. I'm, as always, the only constant thing about this show. I am your grateful host, Cam Williamson. Let's talk about this. Yes, I know this chair makes it look like I have lumpy shoulders. It's just the way I sit in the chair. Sorry. Today, we are going to talk about showing up for people. Hoo boy. Are we going to get into some divisive opinions on this one? Because Lord knows I've been known as toxic in my life. I've been seen as jealous and controlling and all these different things when trying to show up for people. And I think there's a lot of men in the world who could probably relate to the episode that we're going to cover today, especially when it comes to showing up for the women in your life, right? Men, that's important to us, to show up for the women in your life. From a young age, that's all I've been around my whole life. My pops wasn't around a lot when I was young, and I was raised by my mother, my sister, my best friend's mom, my grandmother, my aunts, that type of thing. Female babysitters. I'm a straight guy, so I've only been in relationships with women. So it's like my whole life has really revolved around showing up for women and showing up for my male friends when they need me, but I show up for the same way for them with the same level of urgency. So let's talk from the base point of showing up for people. I'm going to say the hacky thing. You have to know how to show up for yourself. You have to know how you're showing up. Who are you? Because here's the thing. I've learned this the hard way. You can show up for people and be the worst thing for that situation. Doesn't mean you're the worst thing for that person, but you're the worst thing for that situation. You involving yourself and showing up is sometimes not the best way to show up for someone. It doesn't always physically mean reconnect or always be there for someone. Sometimes giving people space and distance to go, you have to figure this part out on your own, because whatever it is, I've had a lot of friends, and I was just talking about this recently, where my best way that I can show up for them is to leave them alone. Because when we're together, and we know this, it's a lot of fun. It's great time. Everything's fun and great, and, let the good times roll. But we're not ultimately being our best self. We're talking about things and we're entertaining things that aren't gearing us towards our ultimate goals. We're sure relaxing and just enjoying life, but this is where you fall into traps like drinking buddies and drug buddies and stuff like this, when you're filling your time showing up for this person and sitting with them while they talk about their life's woes. That is showing up for people. But it's like, if every time we're together, we're showing up only to bring out bad parts of ourselves, well, then we shouldn't show up for each other anymore. Doesn't mean we don't love each other. It doesn't mean that we don't care how this all plays out in the end. It's like, if at some point we both mature where we can be around each other. Again, I'm talking platonically as friends. I'm not talking about your ex or anything like that. That's on you to fucking deal with. I would say as a platonic, like, he was my buddy. One of my buddies was like one of the guys that I felt more like because of who I was formerly in my life. This person spent time around me to try to validate bad behavior. And a lot of people will do this. And this makes it tough for me to show up for people sometimes, where because I'm the Road to Redemption guy, I'm the addict guy, I'm the alcoholic. One, it's easy to make up stories about me. You could say that I've done whatever because they'll be like, well, he was an alcoholic. So, like, if you say that I did dumb shit, like crazy drugs that I've never done or whatever, most people would just be like, yeah, Cam did that. Makes sense. Look at his show. Look what he talks about. So, in that regard, showing up for people can be very hard, because when they call you, like in my situation, I oftentimes just feel like a goon. Like, where I'm being called to hurt someone, to piss someone off, to intimidate somebody. Somebody needs something fixed or bought or paid for or something like that. And that's kind of what I turned into in my life. That's the only way I showed up for people, was just being like this brute or something, which is not who I am as a person. And I don't take enjoyment in being seen as someone who would walk into a room and scare anyone, or who would walk into a room and make anyone uncomfortable. So again, you have to know who you are and who you are showing up for yourself, because if who you are as a person, you don't get involved in other people's drama and bullshit, and you know, you're not trying to be Captain Save-A-Ho all the time. Sorry if that term offends anyone, but that's what a lot of guys get themselves in. You become Captain Save-A-Ho, and you think that's how you're supposed to show up for people. You think you're supposed to kick in doors and kick people's ass and save your lady from her, you know, tower of whatever. Like, look. Men, when it comes to relationships romantically with women, here's the problem. The ivory tower that you so desperately want to climb because, you know, there's a garden or a fucking dragon guarding her tower. Let me tell you something about that fairy tale. Let me tell you how that works. You, as the big strong knight that you think you are, that you're going to go show up for this situation, the only thing you're thinking about is the way you care about the princess in the tower. That's all you care about. And again, I'm talking about a very specific situation, men, romantic relationship with a woman. And you think you know the outline of that castle. You think you know where the dragon's going to be. You think you know what it's capable of. And you think you have all these details that are going to have you up in that tower. Here's the part you haven't considered. She could get out of that tower if she really wanted to. There's options, right? If there's a live human being in a tower, they could figure options out to get themselves out of it, and they don't. So it's either not worth it to them, or what? The situation may be so sticky that it's just not possible at a certain time. But you, knowing very little about the situation, are not going to be able to walk in and go, and then just come running out with princess in your arms and going, I showed up for the person. You know, it doesn't work that way. It's not something that, and again, like kind of right now I'm having to do it in this very moment, which is like, sometimes you have to be able to tell people no. That's showing up for people. Going, look, man, you made the bed that you slept in. Oh, I'm sorry. You're sleeping in the bed you made, right? Like, I was willing to do all the other shit before. And if you're in any sort of relationship, I'm sure that you can relate to this in some way, which is you're always showing up for people in ways that you don't necessarily agree with or feel okay with if you're being unconditional with the relationships in your life. For me, this is where I've always been seen as toxic. Because no matter what a situation has been in my life, if certain people call me, it was always whatever you need, I will drop and burn everything to the ground to be there. I only do that for my kids now. That's hard to do, especially when you're someone who cares about people a lot. You've played that role for so many people for so long, and that's just how people get to know you. You're the guy they call when their life falls apart, whether it's to gain validation for poor choices that they're making. They want you to come hurt somebody in a situation, you know, whatever the situation is. And it's always very odd because then you have to battle again with how you show up for yourself. And you have to look at yourself. If I did these things, how would I feel about myself? That's the question you have to ask yourself. If I do these things and I perish because of it, that's only on me. So I better get right with how I feel about situations. And here's the thing about showing up. It's not easy when you tell someone that you're always going to show up for them. When it's your kids, I feel like no bond is more sacred than that. You tell your kids you're going to be there for them, you fucking be there for them. There's no ifs, ands, I work late. No. I don't play that shit at all. If your kid is used to you coming home at a certain time, you get your fucking ass home at that time. If you're not going to be there, you better have a reason for them in advance why you're missing bedtime. You show up for people when you give a fuck about them. That means you show up for them over your job. You show up for them over your YouTube subscribers. You show up for them over your desire to have life be different. You show up. But you show up unapologetically as well. And that's where we're really going to get into the meat and potatoes of this. Because here's the fact about showing up for people. If you sit down and you figure out who you are and how you're going to show up just in the world every single day. This is who I am. This is what I think is okay, and this is what I don't think is okay. These are the things that make me feel good. These are the things that make me feel bad. I will show up for these things. I will not show up for these. Hey, man, it could be your job one day where you wake up and legitimately go, fuck this. I will never show up for that again. I'll never dedicate time to that again. If it's your relationship, fuck that. I'm done. I'm so fucking done with this. Some of you people don't know how to show up for the person in your life by saying, we're so fucking done here. Guys, as someone who's come from divorce, I lived in a situation for years where both parties involved desperately wanted to just go, why are we still doing this? But nobody loved each other enough to show up for the other person and go, I want your life to be happy, and I know that that's not going to happen with us connected together like this. Doesn't mean we have to discard each other. Doesn't mean we have to hate each other. It just means that what we have now is not what we thought we had, right? That is actually keeping your initial promise to someone, which is I will love you to the best of my ability throughout my life. Even if that means that I'm not going to lay in the same bed with you every night, or I'm not going to, you know, and I think some people get so caught up in like, well, it's hard to say because it kind of counteracts my first point, which is don't be a Captain Save-A-Ho, but it's also equally true where it's like, yes, people make the beds that they make and they have to sleep in those. Some situations, and let me be very clear about this, some situations warrant drastic action like slaying dragons to save princesses locked away in towers. These are not years-long situations that they built themselves towers that have been built by princesses, dragons placed to protect them. That's not the situation we're talking about. We're talking about people are being abused. People's lives are being drastically affected by, abuse and things like that. Okay, that's where you kick doors in. You go fuck all on what laws say and stuff like that, and you might do some jail time in this situation. You just come to peace with that. But again, that's a part of showing up for yourself. Are you someone who's willing, not the idea of it, for you motherfuckers that have never been to jail, I don't want to hear your comments about how you're totally willing to go to jail for that woman you love. Please save that shit for me. As someone who's been to jail multiple times and will tell you, not shit fun about it, not shit cool about it, not shit gangster about it. It fucking sucks and you're an idiot if you find yourself there. If it came down to it, what people in your life, if you found out they were being hurt, if you found out that their safety was in danger, the laws, Cain Velasquez is a perfect example. Cain Velasquez's daughter was being sexually assaulted by a daycare worker, and Cain Velasquez took a gun and went to shoot that motherfucker in the head. Missed, and now he's on trial for attempted murder. Are you willing to do that for your kids? Most dads, if you're not severely fucked in your head and you don't mess with your kids, if you're not a complete lunatic, then yes, you would do these things for your kids. Should you do that for any romantic relationship? That's where things get tough. It's where things get tough, don't they? Because I don't believe in giving up on people. Even friends. I've had friends in my life. Female friends, which I'll be admitted, I haven't had many female friends. I've usually had girlfriends. But I've had a few platonic female friends who found themselves in the throes of what, at least, let me say this. I want to add this variable. With their side of the story is that they're being abused, they're being controlled, they're being manipulated, whatever. How much fact lays in that is between her and that person, right? And this is why it's important. Because people become very okay with using people. So if I know that you're the type of person that's going to get bent out of shape, if I tell you that someone just simply put their hands on me, and I want that reaction out of you because I need someone, it's just a part of my makeup that I need to feel like people care about me in that way. Well, you're now easily manipulatable. You're a chess piece that doesn't know which part of the board you're supposed to be on. You think you're a king and you're a pawn. Very different. You can't move the same. You can't do the same shit. You don't have the same connections that the king has to be able to go straight up across the board anytime he wants, as long as he's got the opening. You're a pawn. You can go one move at a time. So you have to remember, you're not all that all the time. You can't kick everybody's ass. You can't show up with unlimited funds for every person and fly across the country every time to be everything for everyone. So you have to decide, who is it in life that I'm willing to go to jail for, die for, and also live for? Make better decisions, like in that Joker scene or whatever it is, where he goes, would you die for me? And she goes, yes, of course. And he goes, but would you live for me? And then he pushes her in the thing. It's that's a real moment that anyone who's in true love with someone would ask, which is would you better yourself for me? Because this whole idea that I would show up and beat people's ass to save you from this terrible situation you found yourself in, it's can't I love you in the way of I make you see the best parts of yourself and raise that part up where I don't have to hurt anyone. I don't have to be involved in drama. No one has to go to jail. And it's you could just do what's best for you and just do that. Sometimes I think that's the hardest way that you actually show up for people. It's scary to get in the car and know you're going to take a punch to the face over somebody. That's not fun. I'll tell you from experience, it's not fun. You'll do it, and it's fun in its own right. It's got its drama, and you get to go to the bar afterwards and clink with the boys after, a tilt. But it's that's not who you want to be. You don't want to be 30 years old and be the guy that people are calling to be this person's messing with me. Would you, and nobody ever asks you. This isn't John Wick. Nobody calls you and is hey, I got a situation I need handled. Would you show up and beat this person's ass? It's always a roundabout oh, this person's messing with me. And it's okay, I'm sorry to hear that. I just really hate to be taken advantage of or, controlled. And then they start throwing out hot words like controlled. It's kind of like racism online. If you say it, certain people's ears stick up and you're what do you mean? Controlled. Go ahead and expand on that a little bit. Well, when I try to do these things and, especially when it's a male to female relationship and I'm hearing a female friend tell me I can't do this and I can't do that. Or, whatever the situation is. I talked to this person and they got upset. And you go, yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Because I don't want anyone to control anyone. Right? I don't want anyone to take total control over another person's life. So when you have to show up for people, sometimes you have to stand in it with them and go, there's nothing I can do for you on this one, as much as you may want me to. Not that I'm not willing to, had things, crossed a certain line, but it's also in the same regard of you're hey man, if I'm going to keep showing up for you, I have to be able to see tomorrow, and I have to be able to live outside of this chaos that's always seems to go on when you are like me, and people typically need you to show up for them to be like a drinking buddy or to listen to their problems. Not always a bad thing. Listening to people's problems is one of the things I love in this world, is to help them through it. But again, when you're only the person that people come to for their problems, that's very heavy. You then have to carry all that shit. So you also have to remember, not everyone is worth carrying shit for. It's not worth it to hear everyone's bitches, moans, and gripes. So I genuinely believe in, don't ask everyone, hey, how's your day going? You ask someone that and they tell you, and you get this long, lengthy thing. Well, man, they're looking for help. So you either be willing to help people or don't ask. And then know what you're willing to do going into every situation. That's what most people struggle with. Most of you know that you're not going to fuck anybody up over no reason, but you'll talk all the shit about it. And then those are the people that will fuck you up. They're not going to say anything about it. They're going to wait, and something's going to happen, and their switch is going to go off, and somebody's going to get fucking hurt. And it's like, well, people will always show up for each other for the amount that they give a fuck. And I know I kind of say that a lot, as almost like a mantra on this show. It's like people will only do what they give a fuck about, which that's just life, man. People show up for things they care about, and they don't for things they don't. So you have to understand, how far are you willing to go for every situation, and sometimes you're willing to go too far for situations that have no return for you. And for that, we'll shut it down. Guys, we got a big week coming up. Content creation out the ass. I got some surprises for you. It's coming soon. I got new gear. Stay tuned. Next week, you're going to want to see what's going on. Subscribe so you see it. Hit the bell so you see it as soon as it goes live. Some of my times may be a little unconventional next week, but we'll be right here where we always are, on the road to redemption, baby. Love you so much. See you.